necessarily agree with. I don't think it always has to do with knowing yourself, right? Um, and as you were kind of talking about that, I'm sure all most of y'all have seen it, but that clip on Fresh Prince where Will's dating Janice, something like that, Vivica Fox's character, and she's just like running the show. He can't look at the waitress, he can't nothing. And Carlton, who like typically on the show does not show up as the most masculine man, really just put her in her place. He exerted his boundaries and really just let her know in a very respectful way, um, you can't move like this, right? And we saw how her submission just turned on. She immediately was like, "Yep, whatever you want, however you want it, you got it," right? So I think it isn't just about knowing yourself, but I think it's also that display of leadership. I think the two of them have to go hand in hand, where a woman has to be capable of submission and a man is displaying leadership. That's really the only time that it works, right? Because if she's not capable of it, she's just putting on a front. And if he's not displaying it, let's be honest, most women, if they care about that man or have already slept with him, they're going to fill in those blanks and lie to themselves and like create this image that that isn't the reality of that man, right? So it has to be the two components working together.
I just hope women understand that they can't do the ish tests either. You know, life happens, things will happen, and you will see your man in a leadership light or lack thereof naturally. So, you know, in that scenario, I love that episode, by the way. Um, I would that would be comparable to a woman doing an ish test on her man to see how is he gonna handle this or whatever. I totally discourage that. So I just want to make
What
sure
is an
that
ace test? Oh, my.
you know, like when women are like, I'm gonna test him to see what he does, so I'm gonna be rude or
Oh,
act crazy to see if he puts me in his place, put me in my place, or so that's why
yeah.
I was just saying like that's bad too, because some women do that to see how their men will act or whatever. And I just think that's a bad look. So I just think let life happen naturally, and you will see if your man is a leader, and it'll just happen.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in. I kind of disagree a little bit to the point about, I feel like if a woman has the capabilities, like we all basically have the capabilities of being a submissive woman, in my opinion. Like, I feel like that's something that we all naturally have the ability to do, but the choice in women choosing to be, when y'all were saying, they pick and choose, I do agree with that they choose. But I think that innately all of us as women, when a man that possesses these certain qualities is around us and we're in a relationship with him, it's natural in you to kind of be like, okay, like kind of back off a little bit. So I think that in that sense, I do agree that women are picking and choosing, but I do think that it's naturally in us to be submissive. I just think women are choosing to just go against that.
And like Lady Mogulette, I think, said earlier, sometimes it's pointed in the wrong direction. Our submissiveness, our love and care. Sometimes it's with the bozos. Sometimes it's with, you know, the guys who have no money or who's unemployed or going nowhere in life. And some of those women are ride or die for those guys, you know? So it's innately in us. I do believe that, like Cam said. Um, but you have to point that in the right direction, meaning with the right man.
Yeah, I've been saying this for the longest. Like, if you're looking for a husband, show up as a wife. If you're looking for a wife, you show up as a husband. Like, these people are not like, we over intellectualize the shit. It's really not that deep. Like, if you're a man that wants a wife and you find a woman that you're interested in and you're a husband, like, it's one thing to say, I want it's one thing to say I want a husband. It's another thing entirely to say I want to be a man's wife. Like, if you're showing up like you want, like, I don't know, like the whole idea of conditional like it's like submitting to, like, I don't know. Like I always say this, like I yield respectfully to my counterparts. Like I yield respectfully to, like, even like my sistrins. Like we yield to one another, right? We submit to one another's ideas. But I feel like a lot of times in these conversations, what's missed is that in order for a woman to feel safe submitting to a man, he has to first submit to her. Like submit as in like show himself to her, right? Like in a way that makes her realize that okay, he's serious. And that typically means that he's showing her his capability or his capacity um to be her man, her husband, her guide. You know what I mean? So like it's really not that deep. Like if you're a man that's looking for a wife, you gotta treat that woman like y'all are practicing. Like for real. Be
So,
reliable, be consistent, all of that. Like go ahead, Ina.
yeah, I just I get that, and I hear that so often, but how do you know how to show up as a husband if you've never been, like, had that proximity to a husband? How do you show up as a wife if you haven't had that example or that proximity to someone who's a wife, right? And we got to add the caveat, a good husband and a good wife. I think that it's no longer as natural as people make it out to be because there just aren't as many concrete examples to model yourself after. I think that people, especially people who are happily married, they go off into like this bubble, right? Like they seclude themselves from like the chaos of the rest of the world for the most part, that it's not a whole lot of people that have access. So I don't know that it's necessarily that easy to just show up. And I did have some pushback. I don't think, to what you said, Lady T, I don't think that's submission from a man. I think that's a man just being a man to say, here is my roadmap. Here is the plan that I want you to get onto. Here's the program. Here's how we're going to do it. I think I don't see that as submission from a man. I think that is him displaying leadership.
So what I was referring to when I said submission was his vulnerability, him being willing to put his cards on the table for you to see that this is what he wants. And then as it relates to what you're saying, as it relates to like to being having to know what it looks like or whatever, or being in proximity to like wives and husbands in order to be able to show up that way. uh, I can understand that, but we're humans and humans are going to humans and we're going to evolve and we're going to grow. But whether good or bad or ugly, showing up as you are, as your full authentic self, so that another person can show up as they are for you, as their full authentic self, and you guys can make it work for you guys according to what your structure is, what your connection is, what your dynamic is, and continue to grow together in that. I think that's more so what I was referring to, like finding your perfect, your perfectly imperfect counterpart. Like I feel like a perfection is relative. So finding your perfect fit, right? Like if when I say a husband, I feel like my husband, what I look for in my husband may not necessarily be what you look for in your husband, right? Like, so of course, I feel like we share certain principles and values. And I realize that like there's certain things that, of course, innately, like we're going to feel safe around as characteristics within men. But my husband is going to show up in a certain way that makes me say, okay, yeah, I can see this man being my husband based on how he treats me, based on how he deals with me, based on how consistent he is, based on the fact that I feel like I can be vulnerable and be my full authentic self with him. You know what I mean? So if a man shows up in that way, That's what I mean. Not necessarily as in like, okay, he's ready to pay my bills or whatever.